Thank you very much. At this point in time, I will ask you to remain standing. I heard somebody say we will be told to sit down. Almost there. We'll remain standing for the singing of the anthem of the African Union.
Let us all unite and celebrate together the victories won for our liberation. Let us dedicate ourselves to rise together to defend our liberty and unity. All sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa a tree of life. Let us all unite and sing together to uphold the bonds that frame our destiny. Let us dedicate ourselves to fight together for lasting peace and justice on earth. All sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa the tree of life. Let us all unite and join together to give the best we have to Africa, the cradle of mankind and font of culture, our pride and hope and break of dawn. All sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa the tree of life.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Your Excellency, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Sipokosa Paulus Mashatile, Your Excellency, former President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, Honorable Philippus Katamelo, the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of Namibia and member of the Pan-African Parliament, representing the Chairperson of the African Union, His Excellency Mr. Muhammad Ali Yusuf, Your Excellency, the Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency-NEPAD, Madame Nardos Bekele Thomas, the Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of Parliament, honorable members of Parliament. I would like to also recognize Dr. Jonathan Butler, a seasoned South African musician who has graced us this morning with his presence, representatives of the Government of the Republic of South Africa, representatives of the African Union and its organs, including the regional economic communities, representatives of the private sector, academia, and civil society. Welcome to this high-level business breakfast commemorating the Silver Jubilee, which is 25 years of the African Union's partnership for development, which is being held against the theme, building Africa's development consensus, regional integration, African ownership, and continental renewal. This engagement happens to take place in the month that we commemorate Africa Day, which is the 25th of May, and is co-organized by the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the UNISA, and the African Union Development Agency-NEPAD. My name is Linton Mkunu. I'm the Senior Advisor to the Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency-NEPAD, and I'm honored to be your Program Director this morning. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for the past 25 years, NEPAD has evolved from a secretariat into a planning and coordinating agency, and now into the premier development agency of the African Union, helping to shape Africa's development trajectory by advancing infrastructure, governance, regional cooperation, and sustainable socio-economic development across the continent and through a number of sectors. And it is indeed an honor to have the architect and indeed the founding father of this vision with us in this room today, His Excellency President Mbeki. Today, Africa stands at the defining moment in the evolution of the global economy. Rising protectionism, geopolitical fragmentation, disrupted supply chains, and shifting global financial systems, compelling Africa to strengthen its own internal markets, industrial capacity, and economic resilience. In this changing global landscape, deepening inter-Africa trade is no longer optional. It's an economic imperative for sovereignty, for resilience, and for industrialization, and of course, sustainable growth. Notwithstanding the continent consisting of a population of over 1.4 billion people, our inter-Africa trade still accounts for approximately 15% of our formal trade, significantly lower than other regions, and demonstrates the urgent need to remove barriers to trade, improve logistics, and strengthen regional value chains. Africa's demographic dividend, the world's youngest population, presents an unparalleled opportunity. By investing in skills, entrepreneurship, innovation, and industrial development, inter-Africa trade can become a major engine for youth employment and inclusive growth. This morning, we convene to reflect on the ideas that inform the creation of this organization, NEPAD, how they have evolved over time, and their continued relevance to the present and the future. Therefore, this session should reaffirm the centrality of African ownership and the ambitions of Agenda 2063, while exploring the critical role of African business, African development finance institutions, and strategic African partners in shaping the next phase of Africa's development trajectory towards the Africa we want. Our program this morning will consist of 5 segments: the opening session, a keynote address delivered by His Excellency, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, a dynamic panel moderated by Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, a reflective session by His Excellency, the former President of the Republic of South Africa, and then a closing session. And in between, we'll be blessed with musical rendition by Dr. Jonathan Butler. I promise to have you out of here by 12:15 at the latest, and I can guarantee you, Mr. Deputy President, that this will be shorter than any cabinet meeting you've ever had. So therefore, without any further ado, allow me to welcome to the stage Her Excellency Madame Nardos Bekele-Thomas to deliver the opening remarks. And as she comes up, she is, of course, the Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency. She's the first woman to lead this organization, a distinguished Pan-African development leader with over 4 decades of global experience. And since assuming office in 2022, she held a historic institutional transformation, expanding the agency's resource mobilization from $30 million right up to $300 million, advancing Agenda 2063, implemented across the continent. So prior to joining the African Union Development Agency, she also held various leadership roles on the continent and within the United Nations systems, including, by the way, leading the office of the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. She holds a master's in economic development, monetary economics, and econometrics from the University of New York. Please welcome Her Excellency Madame Nardos Bekele-Thomas.
Thank you very much, Director of Program. I think, that would be a good introduction, for my future when I look for a job. So, please bear that in mind. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Mr. Paul Mashatile, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, thank you very much for really taking time. I know that this is a busy time for you. And Your Excellency, President Thabo Mbeki, the architect of this project, whose vision gave a generation of Africans the courage to believe that we could define our own destiny. And Honorable Philippus Catemelo, representing the chairperson of the African Union Commission, and also the president of representing Mr. Max Bokwana, Chief Executive Officer of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, representatives of UNISA, and I would like to recognize the CEO of the Siemens, and also CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, my sister who is here. Distinguished members of the diplomatic corps, captains of industry, development finance institutions, partners and friends of Africa, good morning. It's indeed a privilege to welcome you to this high-level business breakfast, convened under the theme, Rebuilding Africa's Development Consensus, Regional Integration, African Ownership, and Continental Renewal. 25 years ago, a group of African leaders, visionary leaders, made a decision that was radical in its simplicity. They chose to take responsibility, not to wait for the world to develop Africa, but to present to the world a plan authored by Africans, governed by African priorities, and accountable to African people. That decision became NEPAD. This morning we gather not only to honor what that decision produced, but to ask with honesty and urgency what must now come next. I will not offer a speech of celebration alone. 25 years demands candor and discipline. It demands that we ask whether the institutions, the capital, markets, and partnerships we have built are equal to the Africa we now seek to build. The African Union Development Agency-NEPAD is not a ceremonial institution. It's the African Union's development implementing agency, and like the program director said, the premier development agency of Africa. Our role is to close the gap between continental ambition and delivery on the ground. In less than 4 years, the agency's program budget grew tenfold, from $30 million to over $300 million, with budget execution consistently exceeding 95%. That growth was earned through performance, not advocacy. It's what responsible ownership of an institution looks like. Allow me to speak to 6 areas where this mandate is now urgent, and where the choices before this room will define Africa's next quarter century: ownership, infrastructure, capital, productive capacity, mobility, and coordination. The African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, today still operates with approximately 90% of its program support funded by development partners. 90% of its program. I say this not as a criticism. Their solidarity has been real. I say it as a challenge to ourselves. You cannot build an institution you are not willing to fund. The flexibility any institution needs to respond to crisis, to take bold decisions, to move with speed, is constrained when its budget lives elsewhere. Consider this. The African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, created to implement the Vision 2063, Africa's Vision 2063, its core budget today stands at just $6 million. We're asking member states to increase that to at least $20 million per year. Not as generosity, but as a statement of political intent. The agency cannot sustain delivery, attract partners, or retain talent on $6 million. When you underfund your own institution, you signal to the world that you do not fully believe in it. And yet, the demand for this agency's work is growing. Today, as I stand here, 16 member states, including the already existing Kenya and Nigeria, 16 member states have formally requested national offices. And every time I visit a member state country, the leaders would say, we want you here. We are expected to support the implementation across all 55 AU member states and 8 regional economic communities. That demand must be matched with resourcing. Ownership that is not reflected in the budget is not ownership. The second one is infrastructure financing. Africa's infrastructure needs are estimated at about $130 billion and 170 billion every year, between 130 and 170, with an annual financing gap between 68 billion and 108 billion dollars. Under the Pan-African Infrastructure Development Agency, which we call PIDA, Priority Action Plan 2, the African Union Development Agency is advancing 69 flagship regional projects valued at $161 billion. The roads, ports, railways, power systems, and digital networks that must connect African economies to one another. Let me give you 2 concrete examples of what this means on the ground. In West Africa, we are coordinating the Abidjan-Lagos corridor, 1,080 kilometers, 6-lane highway, connecting 5 countries across the busiest economic corridor on the continent, with detailed engineering design now complete. In East and Central Africa, a 510-kilometer power transmission line now links the electricity grids of Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and the DRC, connecting 21 previously off-grid villages, reaching 198,000 people and creating over 400 jobs. And that is directly. But indirectly, I mean, when we talk about the corridor, it's in millions, right? Through the NEPAD Infrastructure Project Preparation Facility, 113 regional projects have been supported with $124 million committed and more than $13 billion leveraged in downstream investment. Through the Africa Team Platform, the Africa Team Platform is a platform that is comprised of all the 8 regional economic communities, ourselves, the AFC, FTA, the CDC, and all the AU entities working together. We have identified over 300 projects worth more than $500 billion, which are consolidated into a coordinated pipeline. The Luanda Financing Summit, which took place last year, mobilized $18 billion for investor-endorsed projects. The Luanda Financing Summit was really, our flagship summit last year. It mobilized $18 billion for investor-endorsed projects with a further $43 billion pipeline behind it. But the model must shift. Too much of Africa's infrastructure has been financed through sovereign debt. The interest burden falls on the citizen, and we are seeing that cost in many countries today. Our work with the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, with $1.5 billion commitment, including $100 million for project preparation, backs continental priorities with African capital. It is the model we must scale. The Development Bank of Southern Africa must be part of that same architecture. African money, African governance, African development. And this requires what? This requires, again, for member states to have interest to have full faith in their own development institution, their development finance institutions. They must invest in these development finance institutions. We cannot accept our institutional funds being kept elsewhere when our development financial institutions are starving from capital. We must reverse all this. Like you did, make us understand, Your Excellency, President Mbeki, the illicit financial flows. We must stop that. It's a bleeding, it's a crime. When our institutions are starving from funds, when our people are starving from lack of jobs, what's wrong with us? We should collectively condemn all this. And we should redirect our capital to our development priorities. And the third one is, we need to really have, if we want regional integration, there should be a regulatory harmonization. A road corridor, a power line, a railway, or a digital network cannot function as a regional asset if every border creates new delays because of its bureaucracies, because of the different policies, because of the different regulatory frameworks. Many infrastructure projects take too long because they cross several jurisdictions, several regulatory systems, and several political calendars. These political calendars are also really bottlenecks. As if everything should stop when there is election, when there is a change in government. And people live there. Therefore, the African Union Development Agency-NEPAD's role is to help countries solve these practical barriers. We convene member states and regional economic communities. We support alignment around standards, permits, procurements, tariffs, and implementation responsibilities, Your Excellency. We are currently rolling out 32 operational one-stop border posts, with 85 more planned, systematically turning border crossing from a constraint into a trade facilitation asset. The results are measurable. A survey of 8 one-stop border posts in East Africa recorded an average 42% reduction in border dwell times, and in some cases, as much as 98%. That directly reduces trade costs and improves corridor competitiveness for business. Regional integration is not achieved through declarations alone. It is achieved through the hard work of making countries implement together. And the fourth one is the African capital and industrial capability. Africa currently accounts for less than 2% of global manufacturing value added. For a continent of 1.4 billion people with abundant resources and fast-growing markets, that is not destiny. It's a choice we can reverse. The Dangote refinery is instructive, with capacity of approximately 650,000 barrels per day and investment estimated at $19 to $20 billion. It demonstrates what African capital can do when deployed at scale into production, into processing, logistics, and industrial capability. That is what African capital must increasingly do, not sit in foreign financial systems, while opportunities on this continent are financed by others. Let's have confidence in our continent. At the African Union Development Agency-NEPAD, we are supporting this shift directly. The Homegrown Solutions Accelerator has scaled African-owned innovations across 36 countries, reaching 48 million people annually, mobilizing $82 million and generating $25 million in annual manufacturing value, demonstrating that African enterprise, properly supported, can build industrial ecosystem at scale. Our Achille AI platform, co-developed with Meta and Deloitte, is providing African MSMEs with AI-powered access to finance, market intelligence, and business advisory, tackling the three greatest barriers to enterprise growth on the continent. Africa must not only trade more, Africa must, first of all, produce more. The fifth is AFCFTA and production capacity. The AFCFTA gives the continent across access to market of $1.4 billion, 1.4 billion people, and a combined GDP of approximately $3.4 trillion, you know it all. But the market only becomes transformative when countries can produce for it. Today, inter-African trade, like the program director said, accounts for only 15% of Africa's total trade. Actually, it decreased from 17% to 15%. It's really telling. If we lower tariff walls while still importing what we should be manufacturing, we have created a market for others, not a platform for ourselves. The African Union Development Agency, your premier development agency's central contribution to AFCFTA is the activation of priority value chains. In health, our African Medicine Regulatory Harmonization Program has cut medicine registration timelines in the East African community from an average of 2 to 3 years to under 12 months only, laying the foundation for continental pharmaceutical manufacturing. Our 24 Priority Medical Products Initiative is now scaling domestic production of critical medicines, antiretrovirals, because PEPFAR is no more there, vaccines, diagnostics, and oncology treatments, directly reducing import dependence and building health sovereignty. In agriculture, our comprehensive agricultural development program underpins food systems transformation across the continent, with billions mobilized for climate-resilient agricultural systems in 2025 alone. We are scaling homegrown school feeding programs that simultaneously deliver nutrition to children and create structured procurement markets for smallholder farmers, connecting production to demand in a single instrument. And this, you can see it from the example of Ethiopia. We are your agency, so sometimes, you know, the progress made by countries, because they're made with our contributions, with their development agencies' contributions, you do not hear the African Union Development Agency in the storyline. Through CIFA, we have deployed $120 million across 48 projects in 8 countries, training workers in construction, agro-processing, health and digital services, the productive sectors that must feed the AFCFTA's value chains. Now I come to mobility and coordination. Your Excellency, this is really very important for us. Africans still need visas to travel in Africa. An African professional often finds it easier to reach a European city than a neighboring capital. The free movement of skills, expertise, and knowledge remains one of the most under-addressed dimensions of continental integration. And recent trends have moved in the wrong direction, and we have seen it here in South Africa. We are even having, Your Excellency, Deputy President, and Your Excellency, President Mbeki, we are having difficulties in bringing African experts here. We're having difficulties holding seminars and workshops here because of the visa restriction. So, you know, we need to really understand, you know, African integration cannot take place if there is no mobility, if experts cannot go from one place to the other, if knowledge cannot go from one place to the other, if the solidarity that we're searching for requires that free movement. It's not only goods and services, it's people. Our main asset are people. And I think, the free movement of skills, expertise, and knowledge remains one of the most under-addressed dimensions of continental integration. And recent trends have moved in the wrong direction. CFAS, we have a program called the Skills Initiative for Africa with $120 million deployed across 48 projects. It is building the workforce that the AFCFTA and Africa's industrial future require. But none of that investment reaches its full potential if our people cannot move to deploy what they know. Mobility is not a migration issue. It is an economic issue. It is an industrial issue. It is a knowledge issue. All 6 areas come together in one responsibility: coordination. Africa is not a blank canvas on which development partners may paint their own stories. Africa has Agenda 2063. Africa has the second 10-year implementation plan. In 2025, 25 member states and 8 regional economic communities contributed to the first Continental Progress Report on Agenda 2063 using the Agenda 2063 digital platform, giving Africa for the first time a unified evidence base to track its own development and direct partner contributions where they are needed most. Coordination has delivered real results. Under the Africa Leadership Meeting, Malawi doubled its health budget and Zambia increased health allocations by 20%. Because partners aligned with what African governments themselves defined as priority. That is what genuine partnership looks like. Your Excellency, President Mbeki, when you and your peers launched NEPAD 25 years ago, you told the world that Africa was not a problem to be solved by others, but a project to be led by Africans. Today, the institutions are here. The frameworks are here. The results are beginning to show. The question before this generation is whether we will fund them, trust them, and defend them with the same seriousness, with the same dedication, with the same commitment with which they were conceived. Coming from the UN, I had to convince our UN colleagues, and I say, UN, now I am on the other side. I'm with the AU. So what you need to do is really support the AU priorities, the African Union priorities. And I'm so glad, and I thank my sister, the DSG, Amina Mohammed, when I said we have got the second 10-year implementation plan. Yes, there is the development SDGs, the global goals, and we have got our vision, Agenda 2063. We can have 2 visions, it doesn't matter, but one implementation plan. And Your Excellencies, I'm pleased to announce that the UN has accepted that they will work within the second 10-year implementation plan. And we have accepted that slogan, 2 agenda, 1 plan. The only problem we have is that we are really competing for the same resources that are there, and that will take time, and I'm trying to see what we can do, because if they come to support us, we are the umbrella development agency. Theirs is to come and support. So we are getting there, but not yet. So I think if we have to really go back and take that same conviction, that same dedication, that same commitment that our founding leaders have put to NEPAD, we need to really move fast and accelerate, our implementation. We can do that. And, when we do things, it must be really practical. If we want African institutions, we must fund them. These are the principles. If we want infrastructure, we must prepare and finance it differently. If we want industrialization, we must invest in production. If we want the AFCFTA to succeed, we must build value chains. If we want integration, Africans must be able to move. And if we want genuine partnership, partners must align with Africa's own agenda. This is the development consensus we must rebuild. 25 years ago, NEPAD declared that Africa could lead its own development. Today, the African Union Development Agency-NEPAD, your premier development agency, carries that mandate into a new phase to help Africa finance, build, produce, trade, integrate, and deliver. That is our work. That is our responsibility. And that is our commitment. And that should be a collective commitment. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for those opening remarks and highlighting those key areas that are most urgent insofar as the mandate of the African Union Development Agency is concerned. Mr. Deputy President and Mr. President, one of the things the CEO did not mention is that although she grew the organization from 30 million to 300 million, she has given us a task a few weeks ago of growing the organization to $1 billion by 2028. $1 billion. I'm glad you clapped, because when we were with Lucanio and the team, we were very clear about who we should bring into the room. And as the saying goes, there is no free breakfast. We look to you to contribute as Africans towards this enormous task. So thank you very much once again, Your Excellency. At this time, I would like to call on the Honorable Philippus Wido Catamelo. And before he comes up, the Honorable Philippus Wido Catamelo is the Deputy Speaker of the 8th National Assembly of the Republic of Namibia. He's also a member of the 7th Pan-African Parliament, where he serves as the chairperson of the Permanent Committee on Cooperation, International Relations and Conflict Resolution. He previously served as in the 7th National Assembly from 2020 to 2025 as a member and chairperson of the Budget and Finance Committee. Prior to that, he was a member of the National Council of Namibia from 2010 to 2020, and before entering active politics, Honorable Catamelo worked at Telecom Namibia as operations manager until his election to the National Council in 2010. Honorable Catamelo studied electrical engineering at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and he holds a postgraduate diploma and a master's of business administration from the University of Namibia. In addition, he completed a management development program at the Stellenbosch University. He seems to love South Africa. So, Honorable Deputy Speaker, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Good morning. But I will greet you properly. Yes. Your Excellency Paul Masatile, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Your Excellency Mr. Nados Bekele Thomas, the Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, honorable members of Parliament that are present, former President Thabo Mbeki, captains of industries and finance, distinguished philanthropists, global investors, leaders of the continental and regional institutions, members of the diplomatic corps, if they are present, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Africans, good morning. Dumelang. En in die Westkap moet ek tog maar 'n bietjie Afrikaans praat nie. Goeiemôre. Ek het vir ons die boertaal geleer, maar een ding, hulle het nie ons taal geleer nie, maar ons kan hulle se taal praat. Nou kan ons vir hulle skinner. Ndiyathetha also kancinci ndivela elanga eGooks. So I'm a Cape Townian. Okay, CPTUT was not a joke, ne? You can see. Okay. I'm both honored and profoundly privileged to address this distinguished gathering on the occasion of NEPAD 25th anniversary high-level breakfast meeting under the theme Rebuilding Africa's Development Consensus, Regional Integration, and African Ownership and Continental Renewal. Today we gathered here not merely to commemorate an institution or simply to celebrate a milestone on our continental journey. We are gathered at a defining moment in Africa's history, a moment that calls for strategic clarity, courageous leadership, and above all, a renewed commitment towards the unfinished project of African transformation. This gathering brings together policymakers, business leaders, investors, and institutions committed to Africa's future. And it is most befitting that we meet on the Eye of Africa Day, because the question before us is a simple one. What kind of Africa shall we build for the next generation? Fellow Africans, 25 years ago, the African himself, you know he is NEPAD, emerged as one of the boldest expressions of African self-belief in post-colonial area. It was founded on the conviction that Africa's development could no longer be outsourced, fragmented, and externally defined. Its founders understood that political liberation without economic sovereignty would remain incomplete and a pipe dream. They understood that no continent can have dignity while remaining dependent on others for food systems, industrial production, technology, infrastructure, finance, and strategic direction. Above all, they understood that Africa's future must be designed, financed, industrialized, and defended by Africans themselves. That vision remains urgent and relevant today as it was 25 years ago. But despite all this progress, Africa still confronts itself at a historic paradox. How can the world's youngest continent remain home to such high unemployment and inequality? How can a continent rich in natural resources continue exporting raw materials while importing finished goods at a premium cost? How can Africa, our own Africa, with its strategic minerals, agricultural abundance, entrepreneurial energy, and creative economy still occupy the margins of the value chains? This is not merely economic questions. These are questions of sovereignty, leadership, and continental ambition. The world around us is changing rapidly. Geopolitical tensions are rising. Global supply chains are being reconfigured. Technological disruption is reshaping production and trade, and climate change is redefining development and security. In such, Africa cannot afford fragmentation. We cannot afford dependency disguised as partnership. And we certainly cannot afford to approach the future as 55 disconnected markets negotiating from a position of vulnerability. The era before us demands scale, coordination, and African unity as an economic strategy and purpose. That's why regional integration is no longer optional. It has become extremely essential. Words must start to have meaning. As a member of the Pan-African Parliament, I was given a Pan-African passport, red for that matter. The same red I got from Namibia, and the same red all other Africans get. But one of the most astonishing things that struck me is when you get that passport, they tell you this country and this country, they don't recognize it. And this for, you must apply a visa. But all these countries send delegates to form the African Union. You see that our biggest problem is not innovation, it's understanding the quest so that the left hand does not be in competition with the right hand. Africans, these things have killed us. We don't need schools. It's not rocket science. It's a commitment. My brother is a judge in Namibia and once told him, there is no amount of legislation that can regulate a moral issue. We need to raise ourselves. And that conscious judgment is not somebody on you, it's you yourself on yourself. And that nobility we owe it to the next generation. The African Continental Free Trade Area represents more than a trade agreement. It's a foundation of a new African economic architecture, an architecture capable of transforming Africa from an exporter of commodities into a competitive industrial and manufacturing powerhouse. But integration must move beyond declarations. It must become tangible, operational, and functional. Integration must live in the highways that connect African economies, in modern rail systems, efficient ports, integrated power pools, digital infrastructure, and regional financial systems that mobilize African capital for African priorities. This is precisely where the Pan-African Parliament has a historic and a unique responsibility. The Pan-African Parliament must increasingly become strategic legislative partner to African capital, African enterprise, and African industrialization. We must work with national parliaments to create the enabling environment for African investors. We must champion harmonized commercial frameworks that reduce the cost of doing business across borders. We must push for the removal of unnecessary regulatory barriers that continue to constrain African entrepreneurship and inter-African trade. We must support policies that modernize custom systems, simplify border administration, and reduce immigration bottlenecks that undermine the free movement of African talent, goods, services, and capital. But no continent can industrialize while its own people struggle to move freely across its borders. The Pan-African Parliament therefore stands firmly in support of full implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the single African air transport market, and the long-term vision of truly integrated common African market. We believe the time has come to accelerate the practical foundation of continental economic sovereignty, a connected Africa, a mobile Africa, a competitive Africa, and a financially integrated Africa. These are not abstract aspirations. These are strategic imperatives because integration lowers cost, expands market, attracts investment, strengthens bargain power, and transforms Africa into one of the most consequential economic blocks of the 21st century. Africa today does not suffer from a shortage of vision. Our own Africa suffers from a shortage of implementation at scale. What we require now is execution, execution, and execution. Execution financed by African capital, execution driven by African enterprise, execution protected by African institutions, and execution sustained by the long-term continental thinking. This is where the role of business becomes indispensable. The millions must now talk. The future of Africa will not be built by governments alone. It will be built through a strategic alliance between the public leadership, the private capital, development finance institution, academia, philanthropy, and civic society. To the captains of industry gathered here today, Africa needs more than investment. It needs builders. Builders of industries, infrastructure, technology, ecosystem, financial institutions, energy systems, and Pan-African value chains. The next chapter of Africa development must increasingly be financed by African pension funds, African sovereign wealth funds, African banks, African entrepreneurs, and African institutional investors. For too long, Africa's wealth has financed the growth of other regions, while our own developmental needs remain unfunded. That model is neither sustainable nor acceptable. Ladies and gentlemen, the rise of Africa will not come through charity. It will come through strategic investment, industrial capability, institutional strength, and continental confidence. And let's be clear, Pan-Africanism in the 21st century must become economic. Economic Pan-Africanism means integrated markets, free movement of goods, capital, talent, and ideas, harmonized regulation, stronger regional manufacturing, and investment in African innovation. It means ensuring that Africa's resources generate African prosperity. No African country, regardless of size or the resource of wealth, can sustainably compete alone in an emerging global order. Our strength lies in the collective scale, our democratic power, and our strategic resources, our entrepreneurial energy, and our shared destiny. Finally, as we mark 25 years of NEPAD, this is not a moment of nostalgia. It's a moment of renewal, courage, strategic realism, and decisive continental leadership. The generation that founded the Organization of African Unity, the predecessor to AU, fought and achieved political liberation. The generation that established NEPAD fought for developmental coordination, and the African is present. You can tap on his wisdom because he had to know what he wanted to achieve. Our generation must now secure economic sovereignty. History has entrusted us with that noble responsibility. The future generation will ask whether we transform Africa from aspiration into implementation, whether we mobilize African wealth for African transformation, whether we had courage to think continentally and act collectively, and whether we left behind a more prosperous, more integrated, more united Africa than the one we inherited. Africa's story is still being written, and I firmly believe that the 21st century can indeed become Africa's century, not by accident, but by design. A century shaped by African leadership, African enterprise, African innovation, African capital, and most fundamentally, African unity. If we act with courage, discipline, vision, and collective purpose, future generations will remember this era as a moment of Africa decisively from potential to power. Let this gathering therefore mark not only the celebration of NEPAD's legacy, but the beginning of a continental compact for implementation, industrialization, and African renewal. Bagaetsho ke a lo leboga, baya danke, enkosi kakhulu.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and of course, for reminding us about a number of things which I will not get into. Safe to say that we have to move into the era of execution, execution, and execution. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, I'd like to call on the stage Dr. Jonathan Butler. Dr. Jonathan Butler, he's the recipient of the Order of Ikamanga in silver. And this is his first performance after receiving this order. Just a few, so you are lucky to have fresh from the grill today. And of course, as you know, this remarkable award was bestowed for his contribution to the arts and music in particular, as a jazz, R&B, and gospel singer, songwriter, and producer. He calls himself a lighty from Athlone. We call him a son of the soil and a legend of this nation in the arts. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Turn it up a little bit. In life, you must be tuned up, you know. So I tune because I want to play you perfect. Mr. President Thabo Mbeki, I wanted to say it's so good to see you again. It was the years I met you, I was black. My hair was black. Now we both gray, and but praise God for that. You know, I'm proudly South African, and I've been away from home for almost 40 years, and I speak about South Africa and our story all the time. We have an amazing story, and I'm going to continue to share that story with the world. And there's some eloquent people that spoke here this morning. This gentleman, man, you're incredible. But this is for a song I wrote that the government of the time banned from the radio station. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, oh. Yeah, 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 oh. Yeah, 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 oh. The boy became a grown-up man the moment that they said you never can. They said you may be very good, but down below you'll stay, it's understood. No, he says it's wrong to judge the state of man by whether fate has made him pale or tan. I do believe, in order that truth can be real, we must heal our land, yeah, yeah, yeah. We must heal our land today, oh, yeah. We must heal our land, oh, oh, oh. Heal our land today. Don't delay, don't delay, don't delay, don't delay. Listen, the girl became a raging fire the moment they said forget desire. This land of opportunity is not the same for you and me, and we be wise, and we be wise. No, she will not bow and meekly stand aside. She will not leave to please their selfish pride. She will be still, oh, no, 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 in order that truth may be real. We gotta heal this land. People, we gotta heal this land. Today, not tomorrow, but today. Heal our land, oh, heal our land today. Listen. We will not wait. We will not wait till tomorrow. See, the children of our land demand today. You and your promises are low. You only stand in freedom's way. Heal our land. Oh, yes. Heal our land. There's an urgency in this place. There's an urgency in this place. There's an urgency in the song. Can you hear it? There's an urgency. There's an emergency. We gotta heal this nation, oh God. We gotta, oh, I hope you know I gotta say, heal our land today. Heal our land today. Oh, talking about healing this land, talking about healing the nation, talking about the children of our nation, talking about our legacy. I'm talking about our legacy. I'm talking about our roots. We got to heal the land. Oh. Shoo, 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 shoo. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I don't know, I feel like singing. I know you want to talk about business. You want to talk about Pan-Africa, but I want to sing. Some of y'all need to learn how to sing. You're going to solve a lot more problems if you learn how to sing. You got to learn to play the guitar like... You got to learn to play the guitar like that so you can feel the freedom in my spirit right now. I'm proud to be you, Ubuntu. I'm proud to be you. I'm proud to be you. I feel like I'm standing in a room full of my fathers, my brothers, and my sisters. We gotta heal our land today. Yeah, yeah. Oh. Talk about healing.
Can we give him another round of applause? I don't know about you, but if I was in the church right now, I would say I feel the Spirit. Thank you very much, Dr. Jonathan Butler. He'll come back later. He didn't know that. I don't think it was by chance that he's here today. It was not by accident. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, I'd like to introduce to you our keynote speaker. And it's an honor for me to introduce the Deputy President, Siposoka Paulus Mashatile. Born in Geraldsville, Pretoria, he rose from student activism in the Congress of South African Students to become the president of the Alexander Youth Congress, later serving as Assistant General Secretary of the United Democratic Front. His journey from activism and detention to leadership reflects resilience and commitment to our democracy. Deputy President Mashatile has held senior roles in the African National Congress, including Chairperson and Secretary of Gauteng, Treasury General, Acting Secretary General, and Deputy Secretary General. In government, he has served as the Premier of Gauteng, the Deputy and Minister of Arts and Culture, and Chairperson of Parliament's Appropriation Committee. He played a pivotal role in developing the Gautrain, installing the Nelson Mandela statue at the Union Buildings, and repositioning the creative industries through the Mzansi Gold economy. Since 2024, he has served as the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, entrusted with driving land reform, strengthening municipalities, leading the fight against HIV and AIDS, and promoting social cohesion. He's also the Special Envoy to South Sudan, supporting the peace process, and chairs the GNU Clearinghouse Mechanism, holding together the government of national unity. Please stand as you welcome His Excellency, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa.
Please be seated. Thank you very much, Program Director, Mr. Linton Nkunu. Your Excellency, former President of the Republic of South Africa, President Thabo Mbeki, the Chairperson of the AU Commission, His Excellency Mohammed Ali Yusuf, represented by Honorable Philippus Katamelo, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of Namibia, and also a member of the Pan-African Parliament. The Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency, AUDA-NEPAD, Her Excellency Nados Bekele Thomas, UNISA Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, distinguished ministers, deputy ministers, members of parliament represented here this morning, leaders of political parties here present. I saw Ntate Maimani somewhere, Mukhai Tsudumel. I haven't seen other leaders, but if they are here, we recognize them. Leaders of representatives of regional economic communities, our valued development partners from the private sector, civil society, and the diaspora. Let me also recognize the man who has just soothed our souls, Dr. Jonathan Butler, Delighty van Ethlon. We are happy that you are here to join us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, a good morning, Dumelan, Abshen, and Dimacheron. Goeiemorgen. 25 years ago in Abuja, President Thabo Mbeki stood before Africa and the world and declared that the tasks we face on the continent are the same as those we face at home: poverty, underdevelopment, marginalization, illiteracy, disease, and instability. Many of us could still recall the great African giants who were there: Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria, Abdelaziz Bouteflika of Algeria, Hosni Mubarak of Egypt, and Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal, all nodding in affirmation, bearing witness to a truth that bound us together. In that honor, NEPAD was born as Africa's own pledge. It was born to promote accelerated growth and sustainable development, to eradicate widespread and severe poverty, and to hold the marginalization of Africa in the globalization process. As we mark Africa Month and celebrate 20 years of NEPAD, we return to that founding vision: an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and represented by a dynamic force in the global arena. This vision, rooted in Pan-Africanism, is driven by the goal of empowering the continent to control its own destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today at a time when South Africa has, over the past few weeks, observed acts of violence against foreign nationals. While acknowledging concerns about illegal foreign nationals involved in crime, we strongly condemn the anti-migrant protests and xenophobic violence. And we urge law enforcement to address these issues through legal means, not mob violence. These violent acts, as mentioned by President Cyril Ramaphosa, are shameful and do not reflect the views of South Africans or government policy. We must therefore stand together as government, traditional authorities, civil society, and migrant communities to combat this violence. Such collaboration is crucial in affirming the dignity of all Africans and all African lives. Today, AUDA-NEPAD functions as the main execution arm of the African Union Agenda 2063. The agency emphasized the importance of African self-determination and focuses on building democratic societies, enhancing intra-Africa trade, and utilizing local resources for development. To foster a new development consensus, AUDA-NEPAD identifies 3 essential pillars: regional integration to strengthen unity and economic collaboration, African ownership, promoting the idea that Africa's future should be shaped by its own people, and continental renewal to ensure democracy, industrialization, and social cohesion, which are vital for peace and dignity. This consensus links the promise of Abuja to the aspiration of Agenda 2063, emphasizing the need for renewed energy and bold leadership. It advocates for deepened regional integration with the African Continental Free Trade Area as a foundation for prosperity, affirming African ownership of resources and policies. The AUDA-NEPAD served as a key instrument to bridge vision and implementation, ensuring that Africa's development is driven from within rather than imposed externally. However, we must also acknowledge that progress has not always occurred at the pace or scale required to transform the material conditions of our people. Significant gaps remain in infrastructure development, industrialization, productive capacity, energy access, logistics, digital connectivity, implementation capability, and regional economic integration. This moment, therefore, calls upon all of us to move beyond reflection and towards practical conversations about delivery at scale. As the Special Envoy to South Sudan, I have directly observed the profound desire for peace amongst its people. This yearning is not a far-off goal, but a daily hope reflected in their voices and expressions. They look to us for mediation and solidarity to ensure that peace is swiftly achieved. Their longing for peace is rooted in years of conflict and displacement, yet it is fueled by a steadfast belief in the potential for renewal. The people of South Sudan convey that peace encompasses not just the absence of war, but also the presence of dignity, opportunity, and reconciliation. Their hope serves as a compelling call for action, urging us to transcend divisions and prioritize the future of their children in our endeavors. South Africa's call for peace extends far beyond our own borders, far beyond South Sudan, and far beyond this continent. We call for peace in Europe, where the war between Russia and Ukraine continues to claim lives and destabilize the global order. We call for peace in the Middle East, where the struggle between Israel and Palestine and the wider tensions across the region demands dialogue, justice, and reconciliation. We call for peace in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where instability has robbed generations of the security they deserve. We call for peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where communities long for an end to violence and the chance to rebuild their lives. Our history teaches us that peace is possible, even after decades of war, oppression, and struggle. Our future demands that we never tire in the pursuit of peace, for it is the promise we owe to Africa and to humanity. South Africa emphasizes that peace and development are linked to dialogue and partnership, as demonstrated by the National Economic Development and Labor Council, NEDLAC. This platform unites government, business, labor, and civil society to shape policies that promote inclusive growth and social justice, highlight that development should be participatory and prosperity shared through consensus. This spirit of dialogue is not confined to South Africa. It is the same spirit that must animate Africa's continental agenda. Just as NEDLAC connects diverse voices to build a common path for national progress, so too must Africa connect its regions, its economies, and its people to build a common path for continental renewal. Africa's market boasts more than 1.4 billion people across 55 countries. The African Continental Free Trade Area represents the largest free trade area in the world by population and presents a historic opportunity to reshape Africa's economic future. Yet, inter-African trade still accounts for only approximately 15% of total African trade, which remains insufficient for a continent seeking genuine economic sovereignty and long-term resilience. Africa cannot continue exporting raw materials while importing finished products at a higher value, because this model actually exports jobs, industrial capacity, technological upgrading, and opportunity outside the continent. To this end, the African Continental Free Trade Area presents one of the most catalytic opportunities available to the continent today. By strengthening the movement of goods, services, capital, people, innovation, and technology across borders, Africa has the opportunity to build stronger regional value chains, expand industrial production, lower the cost of trade, attract investments, and ensure that African wealth increasingly circulate within the continent. African ownership becomes meaningful when our developmental ambitions are translated into practical delivery through infrastructure, logistics, industrialization, financing mechanisms, and capable institutions. The CEO, you spoke a lot about this issue of financing, and it's something that we have to take very seriously. I heard you very well when you said you can't start an institution and you're not prepared to fund it. So that's very important. We need to take this seriously. And President Mbeki, I have assured the CEO, I've assured the CEO when she got me in a corner this morning that South Africa will come to the party. Program directors, connecting Africa for development means breaking down barriers that fragment our economies. Investing in infrastructure that links our markets and empowering our people with skills and opportunities that transcend borders to improve trade under the African Continental Free Trade Area. AUDA-NEPAD must enhance customs systems by digitizing and harmonizing border procedures with the Africa Continental Free Trade Secretariat, establishing compliance timelines and penalties. The future of Africa depends on beneficiation, manufacturing, processes, logistics integration, energy cooperation, and digital industrialization. It requires African economies to move up the value chain by producing more of what they consume and processing more of what they extract. According to State Africa, energy insecurity and infrastructure deficit continue to drag down the manufacturing and distribution efficiency. Closing this energy gap would require an estimated 3.16 trillion rands annually, with less than half of African population having reliable access to electricity. More than half of Africa's energy supply relies on fossil fuels, leaving business vulnerable to volatile energy markets and risks during the global energy transition. In 2023, renewable energy investment in Africa totaled around 247.5 billion rands, only 2.3% of global renewable energy investment. Many African countries continue to be net food importers while having the potential for greater agricultural production. Rapid urbanization is underway, which is changing the demand patterns towards more processed food and changing consumer purchasing towards supermarkets. Imports of food have supported urbanization in the absence of a domestic agricultural surplus. However, food in African cities is around 35% more expensive. If food production is not treated as an industrialization question to manufacture and supply the processed food products demanded by urban consumers, African countries will record growing trade shortages in processed food products. The next phase of Africa's growth must therefore be driven by productive transformation, stronger regional value chains, and deeper continental integration that keeps wealth, production, innovation, and investment circulating within Africa. Addressing this constraint requires a coherent policy framework that promotes skills development, productivity, investment, infrastructure improvement, technology transfer, and competitive standards in international markets. Program Director, I must reiterate that achieving the goals of Agenda 2063 requires viewing regional integration as a practical endeavor rather than just a policy exercise. South Africa, in its chairpersonship of the Agenda 2063 Ministerial Follow-up Committee, will continue overseeing the implementation, coordination, monitoring, and evaluation of our continent's 50-year development blueprint. Our chairpersonship coincides with a decade of acceleration, 2024 to 2033, the period of the second term second 10-year implementation plan. The technical foundation has been laid, but critical gaps see it then. Okay, let me proceed. Oh, it's back. South Africa intends to use its chairpersonship to close them. It is our vision that South Africa contributes to building integrated African value chains connected to ports, to rail corridors, logistics hubs, energy systems, digital infrastructure, and infrastructure ecosystem. Our automotive sector, mineral beneficent capabilities, renewable energy transition, financial institution, agro-processing capacity, and growing digital economy can all serve as anchors for regional integration and industrial expansion. South Africa must therefore continue championing an African development model that moves beyond commodity extraction towards value addition, industrial growth, and productive transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, successfully stitching together the continent hinges on the expansion of logistics networks, including high-capacity, interconnected road corridors that facilitate the movement of goods and people, transforming isolated economies into a competitive market. Moreover, African leadership and priorities must shape development, emphasizing the role of the private sector and our financial institutions. African capital needs to partner with AUDA-NEPAD in constructing critical infrastructure. Regional integration cannot exist without modern infrastructure. Africa therefore requires accelerated investment in transport corridors, rail modernization, ports and logistics systems, energy transmission infrastructure, broadband connectivity, and digital public infrastructure. Infrastructure is not simply a technical matter. It is the foundation of competitiveness, industrialization, and regional trade. Without efficient logistics, African producers cannot compete effectively. Without reliable energy, industrialization cannot occur at scale. Without digital connectivity, Africa risks exclusion from the future global economy. The evolving geopolitical environment, changing global trade patterns, technological disruption, debt pressures, and climate-related vulnerabilities all require Africa to rethink how it positions itself within the global economy while protecting its development or developmental interests rather, and advancing Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. Speaking of development, finance institution, Africa must therefore continue advocating for reform of the global financial architecture, including fairer representation within the IMF and the World Bank, debt restructuring mechanisms, and financing models that recognize the developmental realities and vulnerabilities of the Global South. This platform is therefore both timely and necessary because it allows leaders from government, business, development, finance institution, academia, regional bodies, and strategic partners to reflect on what must now be done differently to accelerate implementation and strengthen delivery. I heard one of the speakers saying this moment is implementation, implementation, implementation. That's the way to go. African countries must strengthen domestic resource mobilization, regional development finance institution, their sovereign wealth mobilization, and blended infrastructure financing mechanism. African development must increasingly be financed on African terms and guided by African development priorities. And we can't achieve that if we don't finance ourselves. If we rely on other people, we won't achieve this. So this requires stronger coordination between governments, development finance institutions, the private sector, and regional institutions capable of supporting long-term productive investment. Every time I say the private sector, I look this side. Are they sitting this side? I'm sure there are some that side too. Program Director, as we gather in this moment, we must also recognize that Africa's unity is a strategic necessity in a world increasingly defined by new poles of power. In this growing multipolar order, where global dynamics are reshaped by competition and consolidation, Africa cannot afford fragmentation and isolation. Our strength lies in solidarity, in speaking with one voice, and in pursuing shared objectives that transcend borders. This roundtable, therefore, aims to forge a new consensus for NEPAD's initiatives, emphasizing the necessity, once again, for execution, execution, execution. By developing infrastructure through our resources, we are not just improving connectivity, we are laying the groundwork for a unified and prosperous Africa. Esteemed guests, South Africa's approach to international relations and continental engagement remains guided by its national interests, which is fundamentally rooted in advancing the development and prosperity of its people through inclusive economic growth, sustainable industrialization, regional cooperation, and strategic partnership that produces tangible development outcomes. In this regard, South Africa remains committed to ensuring that its partnership with African institutions, development finance institutions, strategic global partners, and the private sector deliver practical outcomes that improves lives of ordinary citizens, strengthen implementation capacity, expand economic opportunity, and contribute meaningfully towards sustainable development across the African continent. As I conclude, Program Director, now is the time to build on our native land, not tomorrow, not next year, but now. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for this dialogue and really wish you all the success. President Mbeki, I was going to stay to listen to the panel, but unfortunately, this has coincided with me answering questions in Parliament. And Honorable Ndlozi, you know it can be very hectic out there. I used to enjoy when Honorable Ndlozi was there. He's really a gentleman. But others are very rough. So I'm going to, at some point, request to be excused so that I can go and finalize and polish and make sure that the answers are correct. But otherwise, thank you very much. Asante sana, obrigado, inkomo. Okay.
Can we give His Excellency, Deputy President, another round of applause? Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Now is the time to build on our native land. What a powerful, powerful, and indeed instructive and forward-looking keynote address. We appreciate Your Excellency. Thank you so much. Thank you. His Excellency will take leave at this point in time as he has to go and answer questions. And as he indicated, I hope that the dose of this, you may be seated, the dose of this morning's breakfast has assisted or will assist in making it easier for him to answer those questions. So you are having a really packed meal this morning, aren't you? From a dynamic keynote address to a spirited musician, and as we indicated, there's still a little bit more to come. So at this point in time, I'd like to call on the senior fellow, research fellow at the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, and of course he's also the host of the African Renaissance podcast. And I try to ask him, how do I introduce yourself? And he says, no, just call me Mbuyiseni Quinton Ndlozi. So I'd like to bring up my dear brother Quinton Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, who will facilitate our panel.
Thank you, Mkunu. Thank you. Good morning, and I'm very, very happy. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Butler. I apologize to the leadership that I started with him, but it's very, very nice to see you. And I've never really said in a performance, so I want to thank the foundation deeply for a free concert. Nathi saze sambona. Thank you very much. To the President Thabo Mbeki, the patron of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, His Excellency Deputy President of the Republic, Paul Mashatile. Let me also acknowledge the Chief Executive Officer of the Development Agency of NEPAD, Her Excellency Ms. Nardos Beckel-Thomas, and Honorable Philippos Katamelo, who was speaking very fluent Afrikaans here. And I remembered that there's a lot of those people in Namibia. So, where's Cheetah is part of this side. And he knows there's a disputed border between Namibia and South Africa. I thought he would mention that there still needs to be a resolution of that border question. And the Vice Chancellor of UNISA, I don't know if she's still here. There's a bit of a problem, as you know. The Deputy President must go to that place I used to work for, which I hope everybody forgets about that. I work for and with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation now. No more parliament, no more point of orders, no more questions. And indeed, that's where I am now. I'm going to facilitate, or rather moderate, a panel, and I'm going to welcome the panel members. I'm going to start with Alan Mukoki, Chief Executive Officer of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. This is one of the oldest and most representative business associations on the African continent. Can we give a round of applause It's the approach. Thank you so much. And then Chairperson and Managing Director of Siemens Energy, Southern and Eastern Africa, Thabo Mbeki. Siemens is one of the world's largest energy technology companies. And last but not least, Amin Idris Adum, Director for Infrastructure Trade and Industrialization for the African Union Development Agency-NEPAD. We are basically going to have them speak a lot, answer difficult questions, and then hopefully we have an hour. Hopefully within that we'll take one round of questions. If the questions are precise and the answers are concise, we'll maybe attempt another session. So at this point, I'm going to sit here. I hope you'll be able to see me, because I'm vertically challenged. But okay, thank you so much. This is quarter of a century since the initiative of a new partnership for Africa's development. I want to start with you, Amin, and ask a question that maybe might open in a more provocative way the conversation. There are some critics who argue that perhaps there could have been a much more aggressive achievement of development in the continent had the founding members stayed in a closed circle and said you will only join this club in the continent when you've got the following achievements, that maybe they would have opened up that membership only now, 25 years later. We might have seen much more of aggressive development. Just as an opening provocative question, in light of that, they didn't, but in light of that, what was the infrastructure state of the continent 25 years ago, and how would you frame it today?
Thank you. It's a provocative question, of course. Let me just maybe comment on it. If the funding members decided that it's an opt-in, for instance, and you only join if you have achieved or you met a certain number of criteria, that could be. But we have as well an experiment with that one, which is called APRM, which at the beginning was an opt-in. You are not automatically a member. You join because you want to improve on the governance, and you decide that you are going to be with others who will give you and share with you their observation and their feedback so we can improve. So, but you asked the question, what was the status of infrastructures 25 years ago compared to today? I would say 25 years ago, even the concept of regional infrastructure, interconnection, and corridor wasn't there at that time. And it took actually leaders to come together and to think about the model of development that we need and the African Renaissance before we start really connecting the dot and say, well, we need a regional corridor, that's number one. And to make sure that a regional corridor works, we need regional infrastructures. That's number two. Regional infrastructure in 4 sectors, specifically energy, transport, water, and ICT, of course. There was a 5th one, which was missed at that time, I think, the urban connectivity, urban infrastructures, because it's a fact that, like in 1957, for instance, in Africa, we had 500 cities. And today we have 6,500 cities, within about 65 years. So thinking about regional infrastructure, urban infrastructure would have been good, but we start thinking about that within AUDA-NEPAD. So now, we have a lot of challenges when it comes to infrastructures in our continent, and specifically in terms of regional infrastructures. There are 4 types of challenge, I will say. Number one, at the national level, we have not connected, even nationally, most of the regions within our own countries. You know, when we speak about electricity, we say 600 million Africans actually don't have access to electricity. That's a number that everyone knows. But in fact, it is even much more. If you consider that the 300 million who have access to electricity have access to poor electricity, that hardly actually give light up everything. And secondly, in terms of access to water, we have like 400 million of our compatriots in the continent who don't have access to clean water. And when you add clean and controlled and safe water, the number is even much higher. But 25 years ago, it was even higher, I would say. Then, of course, the connectivity in terms of transport. Transport is not just road or highway. It is also airports, it's port as well. So you have to put all the 3 means of transport and railway, obviously. At the national level, we have not necessarily addressed that, though we are making a lot of progress. Then, of course, the second layer of the challenge is the one at the regional level, which means that we need to learn how to plan together, and that's what we have done through the PIDA, Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, through the Continental Power System Master Plan, through the AIP for water, and then through as well the African Union Digital Policy and Harmonization for the ICT. So there are those plans. But then implementing them at the regional level, actually, we have made progress, I will say, and it's good always to recognize, like the first generation of the PIDA, we have achieved, in terms of resource mobilization, 82 billion out of the 60 billion that were required from AUDA-NEPAD and member states to mobilize. However, only 10% of the regional projects were implemented. But 10% of what? 10% of 406 projects, you know? So, which is like 40 projects that were actually implemented. The remaining, we have a lot of delay, and the delay are coming from, let's say, 4 type of, again, challenges. It's very difficult. When you have 2 countries, and I will just give you an example, that have different norms, different standards, different fiscal system, different currencies, different legal systems, different languages. For them to agree on one single project, it takes time. Take the bridge between Zambia and Botswana, Kazangula. The feasibility study was completed in 2001, but the bridge was commissioned in 2021, 20 years. But the 20 years, some people always may say it was a waste of time. No, it was 20 years for them to agree on fundamental problem about border management at a point where it has to involve Namibia, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Botswana all together. And usually those kind of problems takes a lot of time before actually to even start the construction. So this is the kind of complexity that you have. And then, of course, the second complexity at this level is our countries are members of several regional economic communities, because we have 8 regional economic communities in the continent. But then it's interesting to note that when you have 8 and you have 55 member states, you may think that each member state may be member of 1, but many countries are member of 4, 5, 6 RECs. Some of them are even member of RECs that with which they don't even have territorial continuity. You just wonder why, but they are there, and that creates complexity. I will finish. And then the last point is where you have development partners coming with their own plan that divert the attention of our leaders as well. We have PIDA corridor, African Union corridor, but then we have EU corridor for Africa, World Bank corridor for Africa, you know, and China corridor for Africa, and that divert the attention of our countries and don't necessarily help us really to fast track what we have, the implementation of what we have agreed upon. So I will pause here for now.
I'm going to move to Chamber of Business. I'd like you to keep in mind some of the criticism when the agency was formed was that you were stripping the developmental path of a political economy framework. It seems to me what you've just described might be a confirmation of those critiques, that it had to always already be an analysis, a philosophy, and a belief from a political economy perspective. A mere bureaucratic, corporatized structure might struggle. But when I come back, think of that. The Chamber of Business, in the last 25 years, Alan, how would you measure business confidence on NEPAD, both, and the confidence, I'm told, we measure it in figures over the 25 years. At what point did you start believing in the vision? And sitting here today, practically, concretely, if you were to put a figure of your confidence, what would it be and what projects would be that evidence?
If I knew you were going to ask me, is this on?
It is now.
Can you hear me? If I knew you were going to ask me such a difficult question, I would have declined the invite. But we're here now. We're here now, so we have to deal with that question. And I'm sorry that I'm going to go about it the roundabout way, because the question you're asking is a very, very important question. It's a difficult question. It's a difficult question because we always talk about the 4 Ps. In other words, it's people, it's purpose, it's the politics, and then it's policy. Actually, in that order. And sometimes when we talk about people, people assume that we're talking about the governed and the governing. But we're also talking about the people who are sitting in the structure of decision-making, and they have to take particular judgments about those things. And context then becomes everything that goes with that. You've asked a lot of questions through time periods. What is happening is the conversation that is not actually taking place between the public sector and the private sector. We seem to be maybe walking around each other, maybe sometimes walking on eggshells, and not really dealing with the issues that sometimes are actually on the table, sometimes consciously, sometimes by omission, sometimes by commission. I can't always tell. But if you ask me the question today in terms of that level of confidence, I would say that there are particular individuals maybe coming from particular sectors that would see the opportunity, and then the rest of the community in terms of the cohort of the business leadership in South Africa, those people who control capital, who have the ability to deploy it, are pessimistic. And some of the pessimism, one of the things that we've discovered, has a lot to do with a lack of leadership competence and skills. Because in the context of South Africa, the general thesis that is generally accepted is that there's an asymmetry of skills and competences between the public sector and the private sector, and that it's weighed more in favor of the private sector. So people in the private sector assume themselves to be better skilled, better experienced, better knowledgeable, which is not actually factually true, but that's just the perception that everyone else has. In that equation, what then tends to happen is that we've missed an opportunity to drive training, development, mentorship for the private sector leaders who themselves are, in fact, critical decision makers in terms of taking these decisions around execution, investing, financing. Now, in the context of South Africa and probably the rest of the continent, maybe the one that we know of, only 5 professions are running the economy, or inside to say they're actually decision makers. It's number 1, the chartered accountants, because they sit in the boards as CFOs. They make a determination whether money should or should not be invested, what's the return, what's the weighted average cost of capital, what's the IRR. So they make those decisions because they are so influential, and that's why in many corporations, you'll find that the CFO has now been elevated to the board, sitting at the same level with the CEO, because the board wants to have light of sight to the person who's actually running the numbers. The second category of professions are the actuarial people, because they work for the big wealth companies, insurance companies, where quite a huge number of cash flows actually move. And they also make a determination about what's going to happen. Then you've got bankers, certainly. I came from that world myself, and bankers make a decision about, and they will always want to argue that they take decisions objectively. But there are strong elements of subjectivity in terms of the decision whether you're going to give someone money or not. And then you've got the engineers, whether they're running IT systems, tech, power systems, mixing chemicals, minerals, building bridges or plant and equipment. And then you've got the economists, because the economists are the ones who are going to tell everybody else where are we in the business cycle, where are we with inflation, exchange rates, unemployment, and all those things. And this is the time when my lawyer friends complain to say, well, why don't you count us? And I'm always saying to them, no, don't worry, you see these 5, they still have to come to you to sign the agreement and to get the advice, so don't take it badly. Now, why is this thing very, very important? It's very important. I'll give you a personal example. I have a 23-year-old who went to Wits University to do B accounting. And in his first year, I said, come here, let me look, what are you doing? And his subjects are financial accounting, he's doing accounting itself, he's doing micro and macroeconomics, he's doing computational maths, he's doing information systems, and you look at those courses from year 1 to year 3, he's only learning how to do a job. He's not learning any education. He's learning how to calculate a ratio, how to do something to do with systems. Sooner or later, he's going to end up at one of the big major auditing firms. He's going to be a chartered accountant. He's going to go into a big business. He's now going to be asked to take a decision to invest in Malawi. We haven't taught this kid anything. This is the developmental gap that we're actually talking about. It comes across sometimes as whether people are Afro-pessimistic, but in the final analysis, the level of comfort of the difficulty of people not knowing how to work with people who are very different. Because if you're sitting at the top of the organization and you're unable to talk to someone from Khayelitsha or Alexander outside of Sandton, how are you going to meet with your colleague from South Korea who speaks a very different language and eats a meal that is completely, totally different? So that gap is something that is hidden in the context of South Africa. South African private sector leaders are not as advanced in terms of leadership competency as most people want to believe. It is not like that. So this level of discomfort about not wanting to work with people who don't speak English is something that is very, very big. You see this in a lot of these. We run as a South African chamber, a lot of the business delegations coming into South Africa, and we met the tech here people coming into our office just 6 weeks ago. We invite all the top CEOs and the people. They don't show up. They don't show up because of the lack of comfort. They're afraid. They don't know how to do business outside of South Africa.
Alan, I'm sorry to interrupt them. Just, is your argument that the South African business community you represent struggles to believe in continental development?
I'm
what you're saying?
talking about the issue of development and training. I'm saying these are people that you have not trained. You've trained them to calculate the ratio, to dig up and build a bridge, but you didn't actually teach them how to work with it. You go to other environments. If you go to the UK, people who run businesses come from PPE, for crying out loud. They studied politics, philosophy, economics. They went to study the technical subjects much more later in their development. So our people here in South Africa are uncomfortable because they lack the skills, and we've ignored that part of development because we assume that they have the skills, but they don't have the skills.
I wish we were.
Can I comment on that one?
Let me bring Thabo. Thabo is from Siemens. Can you reflect on that as a point of departure? On the one hand, you are doing a lot of business in the continent as Siemens, but also maybe how do you sort of get around the problems he's raising? But the big challenge at the center, nobody can in a modern economy talk about development without electricity. It's the starting point. Can you also give us your reflections of this quarter of a century NEPAD's assessment of the energy needs of the continent. Was there a misdiagnosis? If there was a misdiagnosis, are you able to say in what way it could be fixed? If the diagnosis was spot on, why have we not made radical progress?
Yeah, good morning. So, to this point, I would add exposure. So, I mean, I sit in a global organization. So, I interact with colleagues across the world. Probably typically same challenges, perhaps different mechanics to solve them. We sit in leadership strategy rooms and we talk about different countries and different colleagues, and you're able to compare. This is my point. And I think we fare very well as South Africans. I've been with the German entities for the last 10 years, traveling the world, and I don't think it's a generalization. Perhaps in certain spaces there are areas of improvement, but I think if I had to look at our education system, what I went through, this is now personally, so township, getting to UCT, getting to UP, and then you are able to sit in global platforms and able to interact and hold your own and engage, and then get into spaces about how do we traverse, how do we partner up, and so on. And I think it's not entirely true. It's not entirely true. Perhaps that's why I'm saying maybe we shouldn't really generalize. But I have also witnessed what he's talking about. And I think this asymmetry between public and private, we might need to deal with it and delve in it a bit more, because it exists. But once again, you cannot generalize. And I think this is perhaps part of the partnership that we need to talk about, especially when you get into triple Ps and so on. It need not only be about the transaction and the project. I think there has to be an element of skills transfer, an element of, and also technology transfer and so on. But with the issue on you know, when we talk about the last 25 years and so on, I get troubled by a figure that says, if you take the population of SADC, it's about 400 million odd, and I compare that to the population of the US, which is about 350 million. The US has 15 times the electricity that SADC has, and yet population-wise, they don't even get close to us. The EU is about 450 million population. They are at least at about close to 14 times what SADC has. We're not even counting the continent. So if you wake up every day with that startling comparison, you cannot but want to support the view around how do we, as a continent, try and solve this problem. Because there's a clear relationship between provision of electricity and living standards. And if we don't address that, I'm not even sure we are ready to talk about economic prosperity. So, and having seen within Siemens Energy globally, if I had seen a lot of countries, I mean, there's a conversation now around how do you rebuild Syria. There's conversations about Ukraine, there's conversations about various other countries. And at the beginning of every conversation, when you're rebuilding, it's power players in the room. How do you get our electricity and our grid up? Because it's an understanding that this is where fundamentally economy, industry, and livelihoods gets to be realized. So part of that reflection for me, I think there's a certain level of alignment that needs to happen, be it from government, private sector, DFIs, and even technology players like ourselves. But if I had to look at what should we do, and I think the essence of my message is we need to build implementation velocity. perhaps the 25 years was around ensuring that the frameworks and the ambitions are clear, but I think it's now good that we get a lot of tone that says now it's about implementation, now it's about execution. And I think part of the first thing is what just mentioned now, that we need to move from country-based planning into regional corridors. And then we need to make sure that our project preparations, frameworks, and financing frameworks are aligned.
What inhibits that? Because 25 years is a very long time. What inhibits this coordination from taking root, for instance, in SADC, in your experience?
Alignment. It's really alignment. It's what was mentioned now around, you want to do a transmission line from Kenya to Ethiopia. The Kenyans agree, the Ethiopians don't. You'll not get a line. And not that they don't want politically, they are aligned, but the institutions in that particular country just created a level of bureaucracy that is not matched with the pace from the other nation. And I think this is, for me, the alignment is important. So part of these frameworks that you have, it needs to be pre-aligned. If you have a standardized project preparation platform and the standardized financial frameworks, then it enables a lot of these projects to start picking up. And hence I talk about the velocity element. And these are the things for me that are important, that when you traverse the continent, this is what you see that I think that could benefit us greatly.
Okay. I mean, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, actually, he's right. We discussed it before the meeting here. We said the ecosystem alignment is the key part. Of course, I disagree a little bit with him what he called bureaucracy, because he comes from private sector, which I used to be in, like before to become civil servant. It is not just bureaucracy. Usually it is really the institutional architecture. And the case of Ethiopia and Kenya interconnector, actually, it's an HPDC 400 kV interconnector between Ethiopia and Kenya. Three things happened. The first, the feasibility was done between both of the countries. Then DFIs come, private investors come, Siemens come as the technology provider, and money was availed. And then when they have started, soon they have realized that, oh, there is a problem. And what was the problem? And number one, from the kind of technology they were using from the two countries were different. Then they did not necessarily agree on the tariff. Then the East African power pool come onto the game. Then the SADC power pool, which is the SAPP, come around here because electricity will have to transit from Kenya, go to Tanzania, and come to SADC. Then when you put all the layers of the problems together, we have counted about 16 different type of problems that involve no longer two countries, but the entirety of the region. Then things start to move. It took like 12 years for them to complete like 250 kilometers of transmission line for about 400 million or something like that projects.
So if it was led by the political leadership,
it's not political.
If the political leadership was the one in the room, don't you think it would have accelerated?
This is where usually we say the ecosystem alignment is important. You know, the way things work at the level of the region or at the level of the continent, head of states always agree, and then they greet each other, they sign, and then everyone is happy, then they go, right? Then civil servants start to come. Then MPs will come. Then Minister of Justice will come. Then every sectoral minister will come. Like, just when we talk about a road crossing two countries, I don't know what is the situation in SADC, but if you go to ECOWAS, Excel actually norms between Togo, Benin, Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, 5 countries in the same corridor are different. They have spent 17 years, they have not resolved the problem. Why? Because it's also embedded into their national laws. And it has to go through a very lengthy process. So it's not just about head of states having this political alignment. What we are saying at AUDA-NEPAD, and let me just maybe take 30 seconds to explain. We say that ecosystem project preparation means we really need to harmonize at the level of every region, because when we say Africa integration, it's really about harmonizations of our norms and standards. So let's agree, that's the number one. Let's agree as well, even simple things like harmonization of skills. For instance, a South African engineer cannot operate legally in Ghana. Or, yeah, because he has to be recognized there. The same for a Ghanaian engineer. He needs to go to the Society of South African. When I come here, I have to go and get my degree, be requalified. So I was even worried that maybe they will reject it. You know? Yeah, because they ask me so many questions.
Okay.
Say what? So, number two. And number three, it is important that we have as well, when we say the legal systems are too different. You have 6 or 7 different legal systems in Africa. And in every country, you have the additional complexity of the countries that makes it about 55. You have, just as generally speaking, those who speak French, they use civil code. Those who speak English, they use common law. Those who speak Spanish use another code, and so on. Then you have specific countries like Ethiopia who speak Amharic, and then the legal law, nobody understands. You know, yeah, it is true. Ethiopia, Eritrea, then Sudan, Somalia, I know those countries, they have very specific actually legal. And you have to align that. Those ones are not aligned. And then finally, something as well important, I think at the level of when we really need, and this is the role of the African Union and the REX, we really need to call our partners into order. Yes, because otherwise we won't succeed to move fast when we want to move fast. Because when a REC agree or with the African Union agree, then you see all of a sudden a partner coming with its own corridor. And because they bring resources, countries divert their attention to go there. That's, I would say, the disease of poverty. When you don't have money, you just go and look for whoever brings
When
money
you say
first.
partners, I think you must be specific.
International partners.
Yes, such
you know,
as?
like EU, for instance, Japan, France, whoever, just name America, you know. And this is very important because that divert attention. So while African Union have its own corridor management systems, EU have corridor for Africa, America have corridor for Africa, China have corridor for Africa, and then when we go to discuss our civil servants, and they are right actually to do it because they have signed bilateral agreements. They spend their time, their energy discussing about this rather than aligning about what we need to align so that we allow projects like those to continue. So it's not just political, it's, I would say, it's a serious one, but the good news, and I will conclude here, is that everyone is aware of that, and what was required is to come with a methodology about addressing this. And for the last, actually, I would say, through PDAP2, the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, and the experience we have gathered through the implementation of the Continental Power System Master Plan, we come now to agree with the regional economic communities about the methodology, the approach we use to handle this phase that we call ecosystem readiness preparation, on which we are going to align on a minimum number of requirements whenever we have to push for a regional project. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to take one round of questions. One question per speaker or panelist. And really keep it straightforward if you can. No long preambles. By show of hands, those who would like to ask questions. And in the meantime, I'd like the Chamber of Business to compose an answer for us, because part of the biggest draining of Africa's investments is in illicit financial flows. Since the release of the High Panel report and its findings, have you guys actually written a response? If so, what did it contain? The response of business to illicit financial flows in the continent. They are robbing the continent of in excess of $50 billion annually. I don't see hands. This is very nice. Oh. We'll take one. Indi, Konala. Yeah, uzab number 1. Number 2, Malapaya. Yeah. And then 3, ne? Thank you. Yes, Mama.
Thank you. Really interesting comments, quite informative. My question is on...
Yeah. Maybe you say, just for the sake of everybody, hi, my name is Quentin, and so on and so forth.
Hi, my name is Quentin. Hi, colleagues. My name is Grace Kuno. I'm a sociology professor. I work at UNISA. I'm the ED in the Transformation Office. My question is on how you, colleagues in the different spaces you occupy, but in the development of the continent, how do you deal with diversity questions? How do you deal with a room or a stage where there's no women?
Where there's no women.
No women.
Yes. Like our panel here. How are you guys dealing with the fact that we are all men? Number 2. I mean, it's a true developmental question, actually. The gender question, yes. Yes, Ma?
So my name is Zianda Ngoma. I'm coming from the United Nations, heading up partnerships and development finance. We've recently launched what we call the South African Initiative for Impact, SABI. And I'd really, really like to emphasize and agree with you, Alan. We have 4 pillars, and what we've discovered, there's the just energy transition, human capital development, digitization, and climate smart agriculture. But what we've realized on the human capital development, the issues that you're raising between the private sector and the public sector, I think they're quite real. And what we are trying to do is close that gap and engage between the public and the private sector, particularly looking at high-level CEOs and your C-suite managers, because we feel like at the top level, the sectors are quite, they're real and they understand technically what to do. But when it comes to development, you'll find that your finance managers are not quite clear on what to do when it comes to some developmental challenges. And this is so real, especially from the private sector, who have a great understanding of what to do in their own technical expertise. But when it comes to the development sector and how they need to roll out some of the community initiatives, it's really what you wanted to say. And I wanted to agree and just say we really need to close that gap. We need to come together and ensure that some of these initiatives, I'm done.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to put my hand up and say we want to support and accompany the government and South Africa in closing the gap.
You said you're from the United States.
The United Nations.
Nations, okay,
Thank
sorry
you.
about that.
Thank
you. Last name there. The lady in white, Pindi. Sorry, I was addressing that gap of developmental masculinity on the stage because I've already been ambushed on it.
Thank you for choosing the ladies to answer.
Thank you, Mama.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chantal Maxim. I'm the CEO of LMD Global, a business architecture company. But more importantly, I'm the global business development for investment for the informal economy at large. My question is not only to the panel, but to everyone in the room. A clear thing was mentioned today, alignment. You're missing one stakeholder with every single thing that is on the agenda. at investment conferences, the massive Kalasha Africa Oscars that happened recently in Kenya, we experienced a massive shift in Kenya because the key stakeholder was included, which is the informal economy. Now, there's a huge difference between informal sector, and we all know this, and informal economy. Informal sector is the business owners. Informal economy includes the workers. So when we went to Kenya, and I want you to listen to this and feel when the right stakeholders work together in alignment across sectors. In Kalasha, every year, creative economy comes together, small little event summit. This year, the informal economy decided to raise their hand, they are going. We brought in the biggest producers from Nigeria. Nigeria is the biggest in Africa, over 30 countries being brought in by the informal economy, working like a structured ecosystem without investment, no billions for running these campaigns. They raised the money by themselves. Tourism happened, food and beverage, clothing and textile, beauty, health and wellness. Over 28 sectors came together. My question is, the policy that has been written by Africa Free Trade, and it's not a conversation for now, does not take into account the informal economy. Doesn't work, right? My question to the panel is alignment with what you are building, because on the panel, you have business. There's no civil society to answer those questions. For each one of you, what are you looking at pertaining to the informal economy within your structure? Because it is the biggest economy in Africa, guys.
Thank
We're
you.
concentrating on the wrong side. Sorry. Thank you.
Very good question. Okay. That's it. Thank you, Pindi.
Can I ask
Yeah,
a question?
I will enroll them for the next session. Now I have to conclude with my I profusely apologize. My hour is finished. Chief, you said the continent sets an agenda about a specific corridor, and then China comes, somebody changes it?
No, people, they have to share their attention, and usually civil servants and countries who give more attention to the one who pretend to bring the bigger money, let's say like that. But I want to comment on the informal economy. Yeah. Yes, it's a very good question, and let me maybe just correct something. The ACFTA, of course, takes into account the informal economy. Now, we have a problem eventually of sharing information, discussing, but definitely informal economy is a part of the ACFTA policy and approach. But from the policy level to project development level, this is where AUDA-NEPAD actually intervened. And we have launched 5 years ago a big initiative called 100 million micro, small, and medium enterprises in Africa. We went from the starting point that we have about 100 million micro enterprises in the continent. When we say 100 million micro enterprises, we're speaking about micro enterprises from the informal sector. We have assessed exactly what are the problems they are facing. We have identified 4 on which we are working in a very systematic manner to provide solutions. Number 1 is the problem of the way they are organized themselves. So how can we move them from what look like it is organized way of working, which is not true by the way, to be much better structured. And we are working not only us delivering this, but we are working with bankers, because any informal economy business have a bank account. Even if you call them informal, they still have a bank account. So we talk to the bankers, why do you know them, so why don't you help us to help them? Then number 2, build their profile so they can access to financing. Not necessarily investment at the beginning, but at least working capital. Because by accessing to working capital, they can actually access to procurement opportunities and tell countries to avail through their national policies a certain percentage of their public procurement to this category of business, because public procurement is what actually helps businesses everywhere to grow. And then number three, create a platform on which they can take advantage of the ACFTA. But then there is a fundamental problem that we have noticed and for which we need to work all together, is what we call the social protection of this economy at two levels. First, at the level of the business themselves. Because they are small businesses, most of the time, the owner of the business, if he faces a social problem, you know, he will just take the money from the business and fix the problem. Tomorrow, there is no more business. And then number two, at the level of these workers themselves, they don't have social security, no pension, no health, so many things. When any of them have an accident, no more work for him, no social security protection. So, but then we realized that our countries don't have even the legal framework to offer social security. South Africa may be an exception. North Africa might be an exception. In between, you remove the 6 countries from 5 actually. Morocco, I would say even Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt. Yeah, and then you have Libya as well, but you take the 4, and then you have to fly down to Southern Africa region, where only 2 countries somehow meet these criteria, South Africa and Namibia. Everywhere else, it's empty. Okay. In terms of social protection for this category of workers. So the idea is to bring our policymakers, and especially not just the ministries, but this is the role of the MPs, to really think about that, because they are representing people, but they are not talking about that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So maybe I think the diversity one, Grace, is right.
Yeah.
It's on you. I think the one around, I wanted to cover on the just energy transition and the informal economy. I think my point, that the observation that I've seen is that we talk a lot about investment and what we're trying to do. And I think what is missing in the formula is how do we ensure predictability? Everybody else who's in business and so on would want to ensure, understand what is the next 15 years look like from a predictability perspective. And so as a technology player, what we often see is, I think in South Africa, I mean, obviously everyone knows what a transformer is after load shedding and now load reduction, right? So this piece of equipment, it's critical to obviously reduce voltage so that it's could be used here from the power station. And those equipment will be required everywhere on the continent. Now, currently what's happening is there's a disaggregated procuring of those. And if you were to aggregate those, this is where now you create a predictable demand. And this is where you now can start to localize. This is now where you can start talking about industrialization. You'll see factories, you see assembly lines, you see maintenance, people repairing all of these things, component suppliers supporting all of this. This is because of the power of aggregation. And that gives you the predictability, and therefore there's the informal sectors that we talk about. And so this is where they can see where they will come and play a part. And I think for me, this is the part that is missing that we're not talking about, is there are certain technologies that are no-brainers. We are going to need them. You will need to generate power. So to build a power station, there's only so many configurations, and they must come here. But I don't think we are sitting and pulling that together to ensure that we industrialize.
Okay, Alan. Please do start with the response of the business community.
Well, I think that businesses respond through
profit shifting, tax avoidance, and illicit financial flows.
I can't speak for
Has
business.
there been any honest systemic reflection? I mean, this is a big issue that robs the continent. Yeah. Have you guys stopped? Said, let's take a moment. What is our response to this problem?
I think that business as a collective has taken a responsible position to comply with any regulation, international or otherwise. And I think that's why you see the change that you have seen.
No, I mean to the high-level panel report. It comes out.
Yes.
The business community in the chamber.
Yeah.
Do you not take time out and say, here is a report? I mean, even the Pope read it. Did you guys sit and say, there's this problem and we are part of it?
Yes, of course. Yes.
So what was, tell us about that.
Yes, no, I think that I'm saying that business is organized through network, as you know, and the response and the relationship with government, big labor, big government, takes place there. A lot of the things that you see coming out of that particular report were initiatives that were taken jointly with government. So it's not a story where Treasury on its own was working on its own, doing all this particular work. I think that banks have been involved and everyone who's moving money has been part of the equation. So there's no way that you can do this work, even as government, without the cooperation of business, because the money flows come through business, the compliance is done through business, the governance is done through business. We are the people who must submit the information to government to say this is what's happening, this is not what's happening. These are the IT guardrails that we're putting together or not putting together. So that's the point. But the second point I was going to go back to is it's important for institutions, whether it's UNISA, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, to take this matter of the development of private sector leaders very seriously. The majority of business leaders in South Africa have never been to Africa. And this is just a fact. So it's happening, and so people are not going to be able to invest money in a place that they don't understand, they don't even know. And it's not the fault of those particular destinations, it's the fault of us here in South Africa that we're not developing the skills so that we can enable our people to see the opportunities where they should see them.
Okay. I'm afraid our time... You'll talk to him. Yeah, I'm also not convinced, but there's not. Let's give a big round of applause of a thank you to our panel members and have an excellent breakfast. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can we give one more round of applause for the facilitator of the panel? Thank you so much, Dr. Ndlozi, and thanks to your panel once again. Very interesting, I must say. Very thought-provoking. And I think he caught some of them a little bit there, here and there. But thank you very much, Dr. Mbuyiseni Quinton Ndlozi, for that. Now, I was getting a little bit worried that you were taking us to lunch. Of course, breakfast was served earlier this morning, so we have time. And at this point in time, I'd like you to please stand onto your feet, everybody. If you could stand and really to honor and welcome His Excellency, the former President of the Republic of South Africa, the man who really needs no introduction, the architect of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, the patron of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, and the former President of the Republic of South Africa. Your Excellency, thank you so much. Can you give His Excellency a hand? Thank you, Excellency. Thanks. Thank you, Excellency.
Thanks a lot, MC. Let's sit down, please. I think first of all I must say congratulations to Jonathan Butler. I'm very, very pleased indeed that you got the Kamanga Award. I thought all of us know this is one of our outstanding artists. I think it was about time. Well done. It says here I must speak for 30 minutes. No. He had said we're going to finish by 12:15. So I'll try and be less than 30 minutes. When South Africa became liberated in 1994, one of the things that we decided then was that we have to South Africa needs to pay particular attention to the issue of African development. Because what had happened when the African OAU was formed, it talked about total liberation of Africa and talked about African development. But in reality, only dealt with the total liberation of Africa. Couldn't avoid it. So the liberation of South Africa meant at least that objective was obtained. So let's attend to this development one. In particular because a general understanding on the African continent was that South Africa, for whatever its history, had a level of development which was higher than many of the African countries. And therefore, there was a special contribution that was expected of this liberated South Africa. So it was quite natural for us to say, therefore, we must attend to this matter of development on the continent. As South Africa, we have an obligation to ourselves and to the rest of the continent to attend to this matter. There was a thinking behind the NEPAD initiative. And that's why we started thinking about it here and looked at everything and so on, then contacted everybody else on the continent and said, the continent must attend to this issue. But my sense now, because Jonathan and myself come from the past, that's why we got gray hairs. So we'll remember something of the past. Is that sense of the internalization of African integrated development in South Africa has weakened. I don't think there's a certain sense of the imperative for this country to play that role in this kind of African integrated development that there was 25 years ago among the population. It's a serious problem. I keep telling stories about what happened in the past in terms of our relationship as a liberation movement with the rest of the continent. I tell a story, for instance, of one of the cadres of the ANC in Zambia who became our person at the airport. So he received us coming in, going out. It was very familiar furniture at Lusaka International Airport, such that they would allow him free run of the airport. He would run, get into the planes on the tarmac and all that. And one day, the Zambia police come to the ANC office and they say, his name was Oshkosh. That was his pseudonym. They said, can we please see Oshkosh? But let him come with one of your senior people. So I was asked to accompany Oshkosh to the Zambia police. And the police officer says, Oshkosh, you have free run of the airport because you work for the ANC. And what you've been doing, some planes land in Lusaka. You walk into the plane to collect drugs from drug dealers. You walk through the airport with the drugs. The drug dealer is Zambian, comes through the airport as it's clean, and you hand over the drugs to them outside. So my mouth is dropping. So the police officer said, now, but Oshkosh denied what I'm saying. He couldn't. And so we wanted to tell you, Oshkosh, this thing. So that's the end of the business. So we stand up to look at. The police officer says to me, no, Mr. Mbeki, please, I want to talk to you. So Oshkosh leaves. And so he says, we are going to arrest the Zambians who are drug dealers. Now, we want you to get Oshkosh out of Zambia very quickly, so that by the time we come to arrest him, he's not here, because we don't want to embarrass the ANC. And indeed, that's what happened. Another story, a sad story. There was the Prime Minister of Tanzania. His name was Sokoine. Prime Minister Sokoine was driving in a convoy in an area of Tanzania where there were a lot of our people. And one of our drivers knocked Premier Sokoine's car and killed him. He died. So you can imagine we are sitting in Lusaka and the news comes, and I don't know what the Tanzanians did. But we were all of us so scared that Sokoine is very popular. It would turn the whole country against the ANC. It didn't. It didn't. They handled it in such a way that you couldn't sense that there was any a sense of hate from the Tanzanians towards ourselves. I'm talking about a particular kind of relationship that we had with the rest of the continent. Guinea Conakry, during the time of Sékou Touré, they taught South African liberation struggle from school to university. If anybody wanted to know anybody on the continent who knew anything about the struggle in South Africa, the ANC, this and that and the other, what battles and so on, the Guineans. Not so much that they should have the knowledge, but they should support the struggle that was taking place here. So when I first went to Guinea, long after Sékou Touré had died, the president complained to me. He said, you know, you people got your liberation in '94, and President Mandela has been visiting many African countries and overflies Conakry. You've done the same thing. You overfly Conakry. And yet, these are these people. We were, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma was foreign minister. So she decides to go window shopping in Conakry, and she goes into a jewelry shop. And she's looking, she was just window shopping. And the shopkeeper says, Madam, just choose, which one do you prefer there? Which one do you think is the best for you? No, I know you are in the shopping, just have a look. So she does. She says this one. The shopkeeper takes it out, wraps it up, and gives it to her. So she says, no, but I'm not buying anything. She said, I'm not selling it to you. I'm giving it to you. Are you not the foreign minister of South Africa? Yes, I am. This is for us from the people of Guinea. You see, what I'm trying to tell is a particular story of a relationship that we had with the African continent. President Obasanjo had a second term as president around 2003. So around 2002, I started saying to him, I'm hearing negative noises about you among the Nigerians. When you offer your second candidature for the second term, you may not get it. So no, don't worry, everything's fine. Until I think it was the General Assembly of the United Nations 2002. He then says to me, but why haven't you raised this thing about Nigeria? I said, because I know your response. Your response is going to be, don't worry, everything is okay. He says, no, everything is not okay. You know, we had to intervene there to talk to the leadership of Nigeria, to say, sure, you've got problems with him about Nigeria, but we don't want to lose him as an African leader. So please, can we reach a compromise? That's how matter got solved. What I'm trying to say, we dealt with, Madiba dealt with the DRC when the old man Kabila took over. You remember that? Then Mwalimu Nyerere visits a country, and one day he says, I'm deputy president. what are you doing with regard to the Congo? So I said to him, on Malemo, we've got an agreement with President Kabila to form a joint committee which will then look at absolutely everything to do with the Congo and ourselves. And then I said, we formed the committee, and we're waiting now for President Kabila to say they've formed their committee so that we can then go to Kinshasa. He said, what you must do, tomorrow, get into a plane and fly to Kinshasa. What do you mean you're waiting for Kabila? You think he's going to reply to you? You go and wait for him in the hotel in Kinshasa. And it was not a request, it was an instruction. And indeed, we got into the plane and went to Kinshasa. I'm talking about a particular period in our history. Now, we've got many problems here. Problem legitimately raised. Huge levels of unemployment. That's correct. High levels of crime. That's correct. But the finger is being pointed at wrong people. The levels of high unemployment in this country are not due. They are not due to undocumented Africans. They are not. We know the history in detail of how South Africa, 1994 to 2000, 2008, 2009, the country goes up like this. Growth rates reach 6%. From 2009, goes the opposite direction. Doesn't caused by undocumented immigrants. The people who caused that, you look at it, that decline, they are laughing in a corner there. Because we're pointing not at them, but we're pointing somewhere else. It's wrong. So it's a problem the South Africans must deal with. Now I'm raising it in the context, Master of Ceremonies, this, that. You can imagine what the person in Guinea-Conakry says. That I now say to this Guinea-Conakry was walking the streets of Johannesburg, go home. They don't understand it. And the reason they don't understand it is because during the course of the struggle, the continent came to own South Africa. It's very, very much South African. This South African struggle was not just a South African struggle, it was their struggle. So, one prediction I will make, the Africans will continue to come to South Africa. Doesn't matter what you do. You can't change the hearts and the minds of these Africans. It's a particular frame of mind with regard to South Africa which they help to liberate. What we as South Africans have got to do is to say, how do we deal with this? You are not going to solve the problem of unemployment here by shouting against undocumented Africans. And leave the culprits. The culprits are sitting here. I can even tell you their names. What we're pointing fingers at the wrong people, and people are shouting, shouting, shouting. I'm saying that there's a regression that's taken place. That sense of African integration that we had 25 years ago, I think has receded. Why? I don't know. But that's a question that we must ask and answer. You find that sense, it is thing that was being talked about by the panel here. The NEPAD at some point started an infrastructure investment fund. And we said, let's go to the pension funds on the continent. The South African pension funds, fortunately, responded positively. The other one that possibly responded positively was Ghana. There's only these two countries on the continent. That fund is still there somewhere. One of the countries, African countries, which had quite a lot of money in that pension fund, public, they said the levels of risk on the continent are too high to invest these African monies in Africa. Therefore, we'll put it in the London Stock Exchange. Literally. So you look at that, this thing that Alan Mukoki was talking about. The sense of consciousness among the corporate world here, South African. There was an American economist, Nobel Prize winner in economics, who came here some years back, got an honorary doctorate, and insisted he wanted to see me, so I saw him. And one of the things he says to me is, you know, you people are quite correctly talking about the need for upping your levels of development. But the banks are not with you. And he says to me, if you take the Euro banks, the debt to equity ratio is 20-1. And he said if you take the US banks, it's 12-1. If you take the South African banks, it's 2-1. They refuse to lend unless you can guarantee them that there is no risk. I raised this with one of our bankers one day, and he said, no, President, what you are saying is not right. We're in a little bit small crowd. It's not right. So then we had to leave to join somewhere. And we just happened to walk together. He said, you are quite right. There's a problem. As I was sitting here, Max, looking at our program, I was saying that, you know, there's somebody who should have been here, who is not. Used to be involved with the NEPAD Business Forum. You know what I'm talking about. I'll leave you to guess. Royal Kosa. Royal very deeply involved in this. NEPAD Business Forum, because he was saying it's African business has got an obligation to make sure that NEPAD succeeds. But what is it, Bosna? It finished. Call up somewhere. There's something that's wrong. I'm saying the internalization of this integration of the African continent among us South Africans is not there. Well, maybe I'm not exact. No, it's declined. You have a similar phenomenon on the continent. President Mogai, the late, may he rest in peace, was buried just a few days ago. There was in the election in Zambia at some point, and UNIP, the ruling party led by President Kaunda, lost. And President Chuluba took over as president. First term, second term. Towards the end of the second term, he wanted to change the constitution to the third term. So we conspired among ourselves in the region here and said we don't want to introduce that habit here in this region of these third terms. So we got to stop President Chuluba. Agreed. Now, whom are we going to ask to go and collar President Chulu. We decided on President Muhai. Said the cleanest among us, and the other one is most honest, he's got all the moral authority to say to President Chuluba, no, no, no. And he went and he said, no, no, no. And that was the end of the Chuluba operation. But can that happen now? On the continent, I doubt it. The level of this Pan-Africanist perspective has gone down very radically. The panelists here should have spoken about that. It's one of our big problems. I'm saying you have this phenomenon of a regression. From 25 years ago, a regression in South Africa here manifests itself in many ways, a regression on the continent, a regression globally. 2008, 2002, the G8, the countries which were called the G8, met in Canada. And we had spoken to them to say, we as Africans have agreed on NEPAD. This is the African Development Plan. And your own relations with the continent must relate to what NEPAD says. Can't be inconsistent. The G8, I was saying, G8 met in Canada. The Prime Minister at the time, Jean Chrétien, came to the continent to work on what their response would be. As a consequence of which, the G8 summit in Canada 2002 agreed on what they called the G8 Africa Action Plan. Very well modeled on NEPAD. And we set up a joint committee of NEPAD and G8 in a process which was called mutual accountability. We're mutually accountable to each other about what we're doing about these things we've agreed. So that committee would meet, very senior. The next G8 summit to go back to Canada was 8 years later, 2010. So by this time we are on pension, like not like Jonathan here. But we managed to talk to the African leadership, which was leading NEPAD, to say, can you please insist that that summit in Canada, 2010, must put this matter of the G8 Africa Action Plan on its agenda. It was adopted in Canada 8 years ago. Where are we now? They failed. They raised the matter, and the Canadians said, "God, get lost." It was never served on the agenda, and that was the end of the G8 Africa Action Plan. You still get today African leaders going to a G7 summit. What for? The thing that brought us to a summit of the G8 was because there was a common program. We check, are we implementing? It disappeared. But they still go there for photo opportunity. What I'm trying to say, I'm finishing, there's been a regression, in my view, on this whole thing about African integration and Africa relative to the rest of the world, in South Africa, on the continent, in the rest of the world. Alan Mukoki said this thing briefly, that he thinks that the Thabo Mbeki Foundation and UNISA have an obligation. What are we doing to say to the South Africans, the positions you are taking on this and that are wrong? Here is the truth. You are busy chasing after ghosts. and you are living this devil. It's a task of the foundation, it's a task of UNISA to do that. It's a task of the AU development, this development agency, NEPAD, to pick up the sensitivity on the continent. Congratulations for moving from 30 million to 300 million. No, does not need applause at all. It's a failure. You know, we were a few months ago, I was in Rwanda. There was a meeting of the big corporates on the continent, led by Aliko Dangote from Nigeria. The representation of the South African major South African firms active on the continent was very poor. Very poor. Then when they look and they say, no, but it's a thing that he's talking about. The level of education obligation we owe this as a foundation, as UNISA, to ourselves to bring back South Africa back to this position where this issue of the success of African integration was a major, major pillar in the policies of our country. Not only government, but everybody else. But I want to say thanks to everybody for coming, for the South Africans, because it's a challenge I'm putting to all of us as South Africans. And Max, I think Max and myself can offer this. Offer a half-day lesson on what has caused the levels of unemployment in this country. The truth, not fiction. So people will understand. They are beating drums about the wrong people and failing to understand an organic connection between these Africans on the continent and these Africans here, because they were together in the same struggle. You can't suddenly turn against them. Thanks for coming.
I don't know what to say after that. Because it's real, it's really thought-provoking. Scary to some extent. But, Mr. President, thank you so much. Can we appreciate the former president? I do not think that it was by accident that we got the kind of people that we have around the table. Because I think that you have a significant role to play in addressing some of the challenges that have been raised in this discussion. And I hope that you leave here with that sense of responsibility this morning and listen to the lessons that have come out from the instructive lecture and thought-provoking guidance from the former president to the very forward-looking keynote address by the deputy president, of course the panel members, and that significant song that I think Dr. Jonathan Butler sang. Extremely significant. And so, in fact, I'd like to call him up, Dr. Butler. And I feel the need to say that he should come up with his guitar. And I don't know, man. You know how it goes. We just, we let go and let God. They don't have a stand for this one.
Mr. President, I would love to spend a whole day with you and just share all the stories that you shared today. You have touched my heart and blessed my heart, and yeah, I'm being transformed by the renewing of my mind listening to you this morning. I'm grateful to be in this room with everybody, and whoa, this is good. But I need to sing the song. There's so many songs I've written. Earlier it was mentioned gospel, R&B, jazz. But I wrote this particular song one day. I was taking a hike and the song came to me. The entire song came to me. The lyric, the melody. And I stopped hiking and I walked back home and I said, God, let me remember the words to the song before I get old. And this is the song. It's simple. Falling in love with Jesus. Falling in love with Jesus. Falling in love with Jesus was the best thing that I ever done. In his arms I feel protected. In his arms I never disconnected. In his arms I feel protected. There's no place that I'd rather be. I'm gonna sing it again. Falling in love with Jesus. Falling in love with my Savior. Falling in love with Jesus was the best thing that I ever done. The best thing that the best thing that the best thing that ever done. Oh, I said I've ever thank you, Lord. Amen. You're gonna get a whole show right now. Well, this is definitely my home, my street where I was born. I don't know if any of you know this, but I was born in a suncase here in Belgravia. In the 60s, there was only a suncase there with a toilet that the council had to come clean. Or if the council didn't come clean it, we had to clean it. And so that was my upbringing. My mother worked in Mobring as a hairdresser. She'll come home one day with pink hair, another day she'll come with yellow hair, purple hair. Abdul Ibrahim wrote Menenberg, Mary Makiba did Pata Pata, and I wrote 7th Avenue.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much. Can we give him a hand? Thank you so much. Well, we're going to move to the closing now of the session, and really thank you again, Mr. President, for that really thought-provoking and inspiring remark, and of course, closed off so nicely by Dr. Jonathan. I'm going to ask to come up on the stage the CEO to deliver the votes of thanks, and my dear brother Lucanio, who is the CEO of the Thabo Mbeki Lucania, will come up together with the CEO. If I could have you. Lucania. Okay. And Excellency, the CEO, if you could kindly join the stage, and CEO, and then Lucania, but you can take the stage. Thank you so much. They will deliver the votes of thanks for the session. Thank you. CEO? CEO first. Okay.
Ladies first. We take it whenever it's advantageous to us, right? Yeah. What can I say? Truly inspired, motivated, encouraged. And I think, we started with the Deputy President. We had our own meeting where he committed South Africa to support what the architects started, the NEPAD, hosted by South Africa. At the beginning, when President was in power, he made sure that DBSA funded everything, the entire NEPAD, and gave birth, nurtured it. And I think the Deputy President today committed that nurturing will continue. And I'm so grateful to the government of South Africa. We continue to learn. It's been very, very difficult, in a way, checkered journey from NEPAD to the African Union Development Agency. Sometimes we think slogans, pronouncements, speeches are just the end, but they're just the beginning. And like you rightly said, the Deputy Speaker of Namibia, who is now with PAP as the Vice President, like rightly said, what matters is execution. What matters is implementation. The unfulfilled promises create problems for us. That's why we have the riots. That's why we have all these problems, differences among Africans. That's why we point our fingers, like you rightly said, President, to others, the weakest. I think we have to change. We just have one continent. We are enough. We are complete. We have to believe in that. We have to have confidence in ourselves. We have to know that solidarity is prosperity. We have to know helping the neighbor is helping ourselves. We have to know the one that is weak today will become stronger tomorrow. We are investing in ourselves. There is not you and me. There is us. We together, and we can make it. We have to start understanding the fact that when there is problem, when there is crisis, when there is war, there is another party that benefits from that. There is the invisible hand that manipulates us. But we can't continue to be manipulated. We can't. From colonialism, apartheid, to today, we have to learn, we have to grow. We can't be the same. We have to change. And each one of us has a responsibility, like you rightly said, President. To me, my pledge to you, President, is I will do everything in my power to make sure that legacy is maintained, grows, and fulfills the promise. I promise you that Nardos and her team, you've seen brilliant team, cannot do it alone. We need to be together, and we need each one of us to advocate and to be our champion. And saying that, Your Excellency, President, I want to propose, and I want to say that we have today delivered a goodwill ambassador that would go and preach the gospel. And that is really no other than Jonathan Batra. You can't refuse my proposal to you. Yeah, please. Come over here, really. Truly, on behalf of the AUDA, we would like you to accept to be our goodwill ambassador and preach for us.
I accept.
Thank you so much.
With all my heart. I accept with all my heart. With all of my heart and my soul.
Thank you so much.
With all my heart and soul.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Excellency President. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I would like to say to all of you that are here, thank you very much for being our ambassadors. Wherever you are, this is your development agency. We do it for our children, for our grandchildren. They have just one continent, and the richest continent in this world, in all aspects, the richest, the best. And let's keep it as that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the CEO of AUDA-NEPAD. The program director threw me through what is called the hospital pass this afternoon. First, it was trying to follow after the wonderful Jonathan Butler singing two phenomenal songs, and then the CEO making a proposal that has been accepted on stage. I have nothing to add. I genuinely have nothing to offer. Let me say the event we have today was made in the course of around 45 days. We met for the first time on the sidelines of the AU summit in Feb. We discussed about doing something this year to celebrate 25 years. We spoke about it in passing. On the 29th of March, I sent a message in the early hours of the morning to the Chief of Staff in the office of the CEO of AUDA-NEPAD. He read the message, he responded to me the next day on the 30th of March, and our collective teams have been working very hard to make sure we have this event today. This event is a part of a much longer period of activities that we're having this week, but also forming a part of AUDA-NEPAD's 25-year celebrations this year. Tomorrow, the Foundation and the University of South Africa are hosting an event at Parliament looking at 30 years of the Constitution. We think it's very important that, having begun today with looking at the economy, tomorrow we must have a discussion that looks at the Constitution and the relationship between the South African Constitution with the rest of the continent, really touching on the points that President Mbeki was raising as well. On Saturday, we will have our 16th Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture. that will take place here in Century City at the Century City Conference Center. And it will be wonderful to have as many of you there joining us as well on Saturday. On Monday, we then conclude on Africa Day, taking the conversation back to young people. At 9:30 in the morning, President Mbeki will be fielding questions from 400 high school learners from 6 different schools in Milnerton, who will be asking him questions and asking guidance and asking his thoughts on what's happening on the continent today and what's happening across the world as well. That later on that evening, on Monday, we will then have an engagement with university students at the UNISA campus in Paro. I thought I should let you know that this event is not a once-off event this week. That this event is a part of a much longer set of activities that we'd want you to participate in all of them, except all of you are too old for the morning one on Monday. But all the other ones, by all means, please participate in those. Let me make one round of vote of thanks, and then I'm going to sit down. It's only correct to thank yet again AUDA-NEPAD for heeding our call in the early hours of the morning to work with us on this event. So to the CEO and your team, thank you so much for the wonderful work that we've been able to put together jointly. The colleagues at UNISA and ourselves would not have been able to start this week as well as we had without yourselves. The second set of people I wanted to thank are our panelists today. The panelists enabled us to have a very a conversation that had both rigor and candor. And thank you as well to the moderator that ably moderated the discussion. These kinds of events don't happen, unfortunately, just by us wishing and hoping that they work well. They require funding, and unfortunately for this particular event, we collectively amongst the partners, managed to dig into our pockets and find some sense. But we also had a particular strategic partner who assisted us, Mr. Nomlala from NCS Investments. I see he's had to step out, but we thank him as well for partnering and joining us in this. The thank yous to Dr. Jonathan Butler have been done, but I echo those thank yous as well. Thank you so much for joining us and really filling both our minds and souls this morning. The last thank you is a thank you and an apology, because I'm sure we're in trouble at the moment. We had made an arrangement for a different venue in the hotel for this morning. But when, as many of you RSVP'd, we pleaded with the venue that they allow us to use this venue. The implication of using this venue and our begging was that the next person agreed to shift their setup time by an hour. We have exceeded the time we were allowed to be in this venue. So I'm both thanking the Marriott team for allowing us to be here as long as we've been, and also apologizing on our collective behalf that we've spent all the time in here. The footnote to my thank you and apology is that when we finish, if you could please leave as soon as possible. that is the footnote to my thank you and apology, so that next time when we come back to the Marriott, they allow us to come back. So thank you so much for spending the morning with us. We look forward to seeing you over the next few days as well, and seeing you in other events, both as the Thabo Mbeki Foundation and UNISA as well. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Sorry, if you could please remain seated. If you could please remain seated. Thank you. Thank you. If you could please remain seated. Okay, so if you could please remain seated. There is a way and order in which we have to do this. Thank you very much. I'm going to very quickly request His Excellency the President to quickly come and join us on stage, as well as the high table. We'll take a quick photo opportunity, and please nobody leave the room at this time. So Your Excellency, if you could please, Madam CEO, if you could join at the high table. And I'm going to ask Alan if you could also join. This is the picture. Dr. Ndlozi, if you could join. Dr. Butler, if you could join, please.